James, Gordon, and the other engines noticed Nazo's unusual behavior right away. He was usually cheerful and eager to help, but today he was distant and quiet, as if something was bothering him, and Gordon were especially concerned. James, in particular, felt a pang of worry. He had grown fond of the young engine, even though he tried not to let on. Gordon, do you think something's wrong with Nazo? He's not acting like himself. James, I'm not sure. He seems off, sad, somehow. Halaplum. James watched Nazo from afar, his usual bravado gone. He didn't like seeing someone, especially a fellow engine he respected, so quiet and distant. Gordon, you know, if you're that worried, maybe you should just ask him what's wrong. James, me? Ask? I'm not the one who's supposed to be comforting others. That's more your thing. Or Edward's. Gordon. Or James. It could be that someone actually cares about their new friend. James huffed but didn't argue. After a moment of hesitation, he steamed over toward Nazo with slow caution. James stopped a few feet away, his usual confident demeanor replaced with something more hesitant. He fidgeted slightly, rare for an engine as proud as he. James, I just wanted to make sure you're all right. You've been awfully quiet today. He tried to sound casual, but there was clear concern in his voice. Gordon, smooth, James, he muttered under his steam. Real smooth. James' face softened slightly. He could relate to that. He knew all too well what it was like to feel overwhelmed, even if he'd never admit it aloud. James, a lot on your mind? That sounds dreadfully inconvenient. He said the words with his usual dramatic flair, but there was a gentleness in his tone now. Look, he continued, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But just so you know, a pause. I'm here. In case you do. One, I tapita thing. James was taken aback by the sudden heaviness of the conversation, but he was invested now. He tilted his face, studying Nazo curiously. James, 4 choices, eh? He paused for a moment, and you say choosing one would be life-changing? James nodded, trying to understand. The situation seemed complex, and he could see why Nazo was struggling. So, all four options are equally good, but you can only have one. Is that right? James nodded again, thinking. He was out of his element here, used to steam and rails, not life-changing decisions. But he wanted to help. James, you're worried about hurting people. Is that part of the problem? James let out a slow puff of steam, trying to think. He could see the conflict in Nazo's face, the weight on his mind. It made him want to help even more. James, so choosing one means not choosing the others, right? Is that what's making it so difficult? James nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. It sounds like a real catch-22 then. Four good choices, but you can only pick one and it affects others too. His face softened slightly. I see why this is giving you trouble. It's not just about choosing for yourself. It's about, he paused, choosing his words carefully. It's about not hurting others in the process, yes? James nodded again. He understood now why Nazo was struggling. It was a tough situation, trying to balance his wants with the safety and feelings of others. Well, you said it yourself. This choice is life-changing, yes? So it's important. James looked at Nazo seriously. But you shouldn't have to make it alone. James' face fell slightly, realizing the weight of Nazo's words. He hadn't considered the loneliness of this kind of choice. He understood now why Nazo was being so closed off. James, you're the only one who's been given this decision? James's face fell further, realizing the urgency of the situation. Only 6 hours, and if you don't choose, you don't get anything? He huffed slightly, feeling frustrated. This wasn't just a difficult choice, it was a cruel one. James was silent for a moment, steam puffing out in short bursts as he processed the situation. 6 hours, he could see how that would feel like a crushing weight. James. Right. Well, if you must do this alone, then I hope at least one of those choices makes you happy. A pause. But just so we're clear, I don't think that's fair to anyone. James let out a frustrated puff of steam as he heard the Fat Controller's voice and noticed the controller's approach. James, well, of course you had to show up now. Just when I'm trying to have a private. The controller walked in between the two engines before James could finish his sentence. Controller, good morning, James and Nazo. Am I interrupting? The Fat Controller frowned, understanding the situation. Controller, 6 hours to decide. That does sound difficult. He looked at Nazo, who looked a little more dejected. James just stood there, still irritated at the interruption, but trying to hide it. The controller nodded slowly, realizing the gravity of the situation. He looked over at Nazo, seeing the anxiety etched on the young engine's face. Controller, these 4 places all need your help, and they've given you an ultimatum. You have to choose one in 6 hours, or you get no choice at all? The fat controller sighed, a solemn look on his face. Controller, it's true, Nazo, we do need you here. You're a valuable member of our team, and you do good work. He looked at James, who was still huffy and quiet. But there was concern in James' eyes, concern for Nazo. The controller nodded, understanding the weight of Nazo's words. Controller, you don't have to be a quint to help. You just need to choose where you feel most needed. And sometimes that means choosing where your heart leads. James suddenly piped up, his usual pride giving way for once. James, he hesitated. Well, I think it's not about being good enough at all 5 places. It's about which one feels right. James looked surprised, pleasantly so, that Nazo actually agreed with him. He puffed out a little, but not in his usual haughty way. Well, of course I'm right. I am splendidly wise when it comes to these things. The controller smiled at James' rare moment of sincerity before turning back to Nazo. Controller, then you have your answer, don't you? Choose the one that feels like home. The others will understand. Both James and the controller raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, really? And what is this idea? James and the controller exchanged a look. The idea wasn't bad, but James, you plan to try all four out in 6 hours? James let out an exasperated puff of steam. Are you sure that's even possible? All four jobs in half a day? He puffed again, more loudly this time. It sounds stressful. James opened his mouth to argue, but the controller cut in. Controller, it's all right, James. Let him try it. James looked at the controller, surprised at his decision. James, but the schedule. James' face scrunched up in disbelief. James, you on your own schedule? That's a terrible idea. A completely unsplendid way to run things. The controller sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Nazo, while I admire your independence, he glanced at James, maybe don't follow James' example too closely. James, offended by the implication, started to argue, but the controller silenced him with a wave of his hand. He turned to Nazo, his tone serious again. All right, you have half a day to explore these four jobs. Are you absolutely sure you can handle it? James rolled his eyes. The work comment felt like a jab at him. The controller nodded grudgingly, though, knowing Nazo had a point. Fine. But Nazo, no shortcuts, understand? Nazo nodded, face serious. He was determined to try all four jobs and figure this out before his time ran out. James and the controller watched as Nazo left with determination in his step. James let out a loud huff and muttered under his breath, "This plan is bound to fail." Nazo arrived at the quarry, taking in the busy scene. Trains and trucks were carting rocks back and forth, loading them into hoppers and waiting for the next shipment. The air was thick with dust, the sound of engines and clanking metal echoing off the rocky walls. James, who had followed Nazo mostly out of curiosity and slight worry, let out a disbelieving puff. "James, this? This is the first place you're trying? A dusty, dirty quarry?" A nearby worker called over. "Oi, you new here or something?" James, who was still hovering nearby, they'd never admit to it, suddenly perked up at Toby's name. "Toby! Oh no, no, no! Don't even think about going to the quarry!" A worker in charge of loading trucks nodded at Nazo and gestured toward a line of empty hoppers. "Yeah, you can try 'em out. See if this is your kind of job or not." James watched as Nazo hitched the trucks, looking deeply unimpressed. "James, you're really choosing a quarry job over working on a proper line?" "A splen!" the worker interrupted with a loud clap of his hands. "Oi! Get moving, newbie. These rocks ain't gonna load themselves." James' disbelief only grew as he watched Nazo finish the task. He mumbled to himself as the worker yelled out again. "He's actually doing it? And well, too. This is utterly unsplendid," the worker called out again, impatient. "Come on and go get another load now." James was starting to get a little anxious now. He'd followed Nazo to the quarry and now was tagging along to the next place on the list. Nazo's speed and dedication to the work puzzled and somewhat impressed James. He's almost doing this too well. And he isn't tired at all. How on earth is that possible? I'd be out of steam by now. James, who had absolutely not been following Nazo, he was just coincidentally going the same way, let out a huff of steam as he watched. James, Den and Haworth works? You're really considering this place over something more. A loud metallic clang from inside cut him off. The worker called out. New one, you here for a job or what? The worker looked over at Nazo from atop a platform, his brow furrowed. He let out a grunt. Den works, huh? It's heavy stuff. Hard on the boiler and gears. You think you can take it? James, in another corner of the den works, watched as the worker eyed up Nazo's smaller boiler and younger frame. He waited anxiously to see Nazo's response. The worker let out a loud, barking laugh. Testing? Ha! Either you got guts or no idea what you're in for. He gestured toward a line of heavily laden trucks waiting to be hauled. James' face paled slightly as he watched the sheer weight and size of them. James, under his breath, that's not splendor at all. That's pure torture. The worker watched as Nazo hitched up the trucks, his eyes narrowing as he gauged Nazo's strength and boiler. James, watching anxiously, was still mumbling to himself. James, he's actually agreeing to this. It's a terrible idea. The worker let out a snort and called out, his voice booming across the denworks. Don't let those trucks beat you, newbie. They're heavy, they are. James could scarcely believe it. Nazo had managed to get the first two jobs done, and had even agreed to the hard labor of the denworks. He huffed as he followed after Nazo, worry and disbelief mingling in his steam. James, it's unbelievable. First the quarry, then the denworks, and he's still going? And not tired at all? It's utterly absurd. James was becoming increasingly nervous and confused as Nazo arrived at the next place on the list, Edward's branch line. While it was a quieter, more peaceful place, especially compared to the previous locations, James still didn't understand why Nazo was choosing these spots. James, Edward's line? This makes no sense. It's peaceful and beautiful, sure, but Nazo's talents would be wasted here. Edward, who was lounging on one of his platforms, looked up as Nazo spoke. His face bore a smile of mild curiosity. Edward, hello there, Nazo. Testing, you say? James, who was still tagging along, let out off of steam, shaking his head. James, under his breath. It's nonsense. Edward's line is so placid. How can this teach Nazo anything useful? It's a dreadful waste of his ability. Edward chuckled softly, noticing the way Nazo was practically itching to start working. He leaned back and closed his eyes, thinking, before an idea came to him. Edward, I do have a request if you're up for it. James perked up, interested despite himself. He hovered closer to listen in. This was getting interesting. Edward opened one eye, a smirk playing on his face. Good. Then how about you take my trucks for a run? James' jaw dropped. Your trucks? Edward, he sputtered. That's cheating. He already did quarry work and den works. Edward just smiled serenely. It'll be fun. James, who had been just about to protest Edward's request, now froze mid-steam puff. His face twisted in disbelief. Wait, you're actually agreeing to that? Edward chuckled as he watched James flounder. See, he knows a good opportunity when it comes along. Nazo, meanwhile, was already hitching up the trucks with an eagerness that made James even more alarmed. Edward waved cheerily as Nazo departed, while James, still stunned, puffed and steamed anxiously. He was almost too shocked to follow at first, but then suddenly jolted himself into action. Wait, he called, rushing after Nazo. Edward chuckled to himself and settled back on his platform as James hastened after Nazo. This was going to be interesting. James' wheels nearly skidded to a halt as the realization hit him. 4 hours! He shrieked, steam shooting out in frantic bursts. Nazo, you've done 2 of these jobs and you still have your normal work left too? A passing worker, clearly used to James' dramatics, muttered. Blimey! This new one's got stamina. James, who had been still hovering nearby because of course he was, watched in utter disbelief as Nazo finished yet another task on time. He let out a loud, dramatic sigh. This is impossible. How are you not completely out of steam? The worker from earlier called over with a smirk. Told you, stamina like an express train. James, who had been silently fuming at Nazo's seemingly boundless energy, was now starting to feel a twinge of worry. This was the last job of the day, and Nazo still hadn't shown any sign of fatigue. James followed the younger engine, still muttering to himself, "Last one, just one more." He glanced at his pocket watch. Just 2 hours remaining. Nazo arrived at the final job site, expecting to find workers and trucks waiting for him, but to his surprise, there was no one around. James, who had been tagging along, of course he was, also looked around in confusion. "James, hang on, where is everyone? The workmen, the trucks?" He paused, a realization dawning on him. "Don't tell me." James' face twisted in outrage. "A test!" He sputtered, steam whistling from his dome. "You mean to tell me you've been working your wheels off for nothing? That's a scandal!" A passing worker, clearly amused by James' meltdown, called out, "Sounds like someone overcomplicated their own trial." James' outrage faded slightly, replaced by bewildered curiosity. He blinked at Nazo. "Wait, so you're still deciding where to work? After all that?" A worker passing by snorted and muttered, "Bloody hell. This new one's got a mile of track ahead to figure things out," huffed, though his tone was more confused than angry now. But the quarry, the Denworks, Edward's line." James' jaw dropped, steam shooting out in startled bursts. "What?" he shrieked, wheels nearly stalling. "You mean to tell me you've been working shifts at all four places just to pick one? That's utter madness. You'll be a rusty wreck by tomorrow." A passing worker wheezed with laughter. "Kids got guts, or no self-preservation." James sputtered in baffled outrage. But you can't just work four separate jobs to decide." That's utterly ridiculous. You'll run yourself ragged. You should be testing at the most one place, not four at once. Another worker passed by, shaking his head. Poor lad's got no common sense, but it's damn impressive anyway. James spluttered again, his disbelief only growing. 6 hours? And you spent them all testing at four separate places? Oh, this is bad. This is terrible. You're going to wear yourself down to a pile of rusted parts. A worker chuckled, watching the spectacle with amusement. Kid's either mad or has an engine made of cast iron. Maybe both, maybe both. James' face twisted in outrage once more at the thought of Nazo still having his own work to do. You still have your normal daily work after all this? What on earth are you thinking? That's far too much. You're going to collapse at this rate. Another worker snickered, still amused by the entire situation. This lad really has a death wish, doesn't he? James, still spluttering in disbelief, just stared at Nazo. Did he really not understand the severity of his actions? You're still going to do your regular work now? After what you've put yourself through today? It's insane. You're going to completely burn out if you're not careful. A different worker, clearly enjoying the show, added, Lad's either a madman or actually indestructible. James watched, completely dumbfounded, as Nazo finished his fourth job without so much as a wobble in his wheels. The worker from earlier let out a low whistle. Blimey. Either he's got stamina of steel, or I need to start drinking whatever fuel he's on. James, still steaming furiously. This is not how trials are supposed to work. You're going to wreck yourself. James watched as Nazo started making his way toward his normal work, still reeling from the shock of the day's events. You're still going? After everything you did? Are you determined to work yourself into the scrapyard today? A different worker, still watching with interest, muttered, This one's either a total moron or the most dedicated rookie on the rails. James, who had spent the entire time fretting over Nazo's well-being, was still steaming with worry as Nazo returned to Tidmouth. Darkness was descending, the sky painted with the first stars of the night. "There you are," he huffed, his voice filled with both relief and irritation. "You took your damn time." Henry, who was just getting ready for the flying kipper, glanced at Nazo and James, clearly amused by the sight of the red engine fussing over the younger one. James huffed, still bristling with worry and frustration. "I'll say, working yourself to the verge of exhaustion at 4 separate locations, and then completing your usual duties on top of that. Have you no sense of self-preservation, Nazo? You're lucky you still have the steam left to stand here." James, who had been about to continue scolding Nazo for his reckless behavior, stopped as the younger engine spoke. He stared at him for a moment, taken off guard by the revelation. Wait, you've decided where you want to be?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his usually stern voice. James' jaw dropped, steam shooting out in short bursts of disbelief. "What? You can't just leave it at that! After all the trouble you went through today, and now you're not even going to tell me!" A worker passing by snorted and muttered, "Kid's got a sense of drama. I like him." The shed buzzed with hushed chatter as the other engines processed Nazo's impossible feat. James, still indignant from last night, paced in tight circles, his wheels clanking loudly on the gravel. "James, 6 hours of trial work at 4 separate locations and then his usual duties too? It's madness. Absolute insanity." Gordon, ever smug, leaned against a wall. "Sounds like someone's to be noticed." A few yards away, Henry, muttering to Percy, "Either that or he's got a boiler made of steel and sleep is just a myth." The engines all joined in the conversation, each offering their own perspective on the matter. Toby, ever cheerful, chuckled. Toby, quite a day for the new chap, wasn't it? I never saw anyone work so hard on their first day. Edward, lounging on his platform, nodded. Aye, he's certainly got stamina. But I couldn't help but worry for the lad. Working that hard, it's not healthy. Oliver and Emily, who were listening in, exchanged thoughtful glances. Oliver looked intrigued. Oliver, but the real question is, why did he do it? I mean, 4 different jobs and his normal work on top of that. It's baffling. Emily, with her usual calm demeanor, chipped in. Perhaps he was trying to figure out which job was the best fit for him? It seems a rather extreme way to go about it, though. James, still pacing in tight circles, scoffed. James, a waste of time, that's what it was. Working himself to death just to decide where he wants to go? It's ridiculous. He should have picked one place to trial at, not 4. And on his first day, Gordon, lounging on a platform, smirked at James' irritation. Gordon, sounds like someone's jealous. James spun around, sputtering in indignant outrage. Jealous of that reckless rookie who nearly ran himself into a ditch by the end of the day? Nedward chuckled at James' reaction, while Toby and Percy snickered nearby. Meanwhile, Henry, who had been quietly observing the conversation, spoke up with a hint of amusement in his voice. Henry, I couldn't help but notice the one thing you've yet to mention, James. James huffed, still bristling with a mix of irritation and curiosity. James, and what might that be, Henry? Henry chuckled, clearly enjoying the chance to tease James. Henry, well, you've been ranting about how Nazo worked at 4 different locations and how taxing it was on him, but you never mentioned the most important thing of all. Now completely intrigued despite himself, huffed again. Well, go on then. What is this most important thing? Gordon, unable to resist throwing in his own 2 cents, chimed in with a sly smile. Gordon, oh, this is going to be good. Henry chuckled, clearly relishing the moment. The other engines all leaned in, waiting to hear what Henry was about to say. You see, James, you've been so focused on the fact that Nazo worked at 4 different locations, but you've completely overlooked something quite significant. James, now more intrigued than ever, stopped pacing and faced Henry with a mixture of impatience and curiosity. James, fine. What have I overlooked, Henry? What is this significant thing you're talking about? The other engines watched in anticipation. Henry leaned in, a sly smirk on his face. You still don't know where he chose to work. A collective gasp rippled through the group. James froze mid-steam puff. His jaw dropped open so wide that a passing bird nearly landed in it. Oh ho ho! Now that's rich. James, speechless for a moment, sputtered and stammered a bit before finally regaining his composure. James, you're saying I've been going on and on about Nazo working at those 4 jobs, and I don't even know where he actually picked to be stationed? Is that correct? The other engines snickered at James, clearly enjoying his flabbergasted expression. Henry nodded, grinning from ear to ear. That's right, James. All this time, you've been fretting over the number of jobs Nazo tried out, but you forgot to find out where he'd actually chosen to work. The other engines chuckled, watching as James absorbed the information. The engines all spun around at the sound of Nazo's voice. James, looking somewhat embarrassed, attempted to compose himself. James, we were merely discussing the extent of your trial work yesterday. Gordon, unable to resist a good tease, smirked at Nazo. Gordon, or more like your lack of common sense. James, who had been trying to maintain his usual prideful demeanor, let out a long-suffering sigh. James, Nazo, my dear fellow, you could have asked for opinions, like a normal engine, instead of working yourself half to death across 4 separate jobs. A worker passing by snorted. Blimey, kid really took thorough research too far. The others paused, taken aback by Nazoli random rambling. James, his irritation resurfacing, tried to make sense of the younger engine's words. Pardon? What are you on about, Nazo? Gordon, still smug, snickered. Gordon, looks like that lack of sleep did a number on the lad's brain. James, who had been moments ago caught in a rant about Nazo's reckless trial work, now froze mid-puff, his wheels screeching slightly on the gravel. Wait. He squinted at Nazo. Are you... are you saying that all this was just to avoid hearing Duck talk about the Great Waste? A worker dropped his wrench with a loud clang. Even Gordon looked stunned for once. Duck suddenly appearing from behind a signal post. I heard that! James, who had been halfway into another dramatic speech about reckless decision-making, now froze mid-puff. His face twisted in outrage. You what? You mean to tell me you worked yourself into a scrap heap just to avoid hearing Duck's rants? The other engines collectively held their breath as James' steam pressure visibly spiked. Duck, suddenly appearing from behind a signal post. Excuse me. James's already high steam pressure shot up to dangerous levels. He practically sputtered as he tried to form words. James, you wanted to try your own, you say? And you somehow thought working yourself half to death was the way to do it? Did all that hard work melt your boiler, lad? Did it? The other engines quietly backed away, knowing they definitely did not want to get in the way when James started shouting. Even Duck had the good sense to look concerned this time. James, who had been mid-tirade, froze, his wheels screeching to a halt. His face went through several shades of red before landing on an indignant purple. "Excuse me!" he shrieked. "I am not late. I always pull the express at exactly 3:47 p.m. And you are in no position to scold anyone about punctuality after yesterday's display." Gordon, leaning against a signal post with his usual smug smirk. "Oh, hoo, someone's been caught." James bristled at the mention of Thomas. This was another sore spot for the red engine. James muttered, "That boy is always in the way. I've half a mind to have a stern talk with him next time I see him about being more." Gordon rolled his eyes. He knew exactly where this was going. Gordon. Oh, don't start on a Thomas rant again, James. James, his pride wounded, scoffed. But he knew Gordon was right. He was already running late. James, fine. I'll go and see what the troublesome brat is up to now. Gordon rolled his eyes again, while Duck and the other engines stifled their laughs. Nazo just watched. James, still slightly flustered from the earlier exchange, paused mid-steam puff. His scowl softened just a fraction as Nazo wished him well. You too, I suppose, he muttered gruffly, though there was no real heat behind it now. A worker passing by chuckled. "Aw, look at that! The grumpy old steam's got a soft spot after all." James, who had been halfway to storming off in a huff, whipped his head back around, his wheels screeching on the gravel. He squawked indignantly, "Don't you dare lump me in with these lazy bones! I'll have you know I am always punctual and properly scheduled." A loud whistle blew from the signal tower. James froze mid-rant as an official-looking worker marched up. "Ahem! All engines report for maintenance checks immediately." The engines all froze upon hearing the official instruction. Even the cocky ones like Gordon went quiet. Everyone knew a maintenance check meant a thorough inspection and a long wait in the maintenance shed, which meant delays and missing jobs. Gordon, splendid. Just what I need. A tedious check in the shed while the others get to enjoy the sunshine worker. You too, Gordon. Gordon stopped mid-rant, staring at the worker in disbelief. Gordon, me? I just had a check last week. The worker, looking somewhat amused, shook his head. It was rare to see the arrogant express engine speechless worker. Doesn't matter. The Fat Controller wants every engine inspected as soon as possible. No exceptions. Gordon looked outraged, but he knew he couldn't argue with the Fat Controller's orders. He grudgingly started towards the maintenance shed. This is absurd. I could be out handling the express or pulling a goods train. James, who had been glaring disapprovingly at Gordon's complaints, whipped his head around as Nazo spoke. He narrowed his eyes at the younger engine. "You?" James scoffed, still somewhat miffed at Nazo's earlier behavior. "You think you could handle the express?" James huffed again, his pride clearly bruised. To hear such a young steam engine say pulling the express was not difficult, it was almost insulting to him. "Not difficult, eh?" he retorted. "The express is a skilled and important job. Handling passengers and being perfectly on time. It's no job for a reckless, inexperienced upstart like you." James sputtered, at a loss for words again. The other engines all shifted uncomfortably. They knew James couldn't argue with that. Even Gordon, the most pompous of them all, couldn't deny that Nazo was making a valid point this time. It was rare to see James so completely bested by a younger engine. James's engine steamed in silent fury. He hated being proven wrong, especially by a reckless upstart. However, he knew he was beaten. With a huff, he waved a dismissive wheel. "Fine. Off you go then. Gordon, who couldn't resist poking the fire, added with a smirk. Well, 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 look at that. James has his mouth shut for once. James, who had spent the journey to the station fuming and stewing in silent anger, watched as Nazo approached the platform. The platform was bustling with passengers, all eagerly waiting to board the express. James huffed, watching as the younger engine slowed to a halt by the tracks. Humph! Let's see how well he fares with a train full of impatient passengers, he muttered sulkily to himself. The passengers, excited to begin their journey, quickly boarded the train. James watched from a distance, still stewing in his annoyance. James mumbling, I bet the reckless blighter gets off schedule on his very first run, can't even follow the basic rules of express pulling. James, who had been sulking in the station yard, whirled around at Nazo's words. His face went from a furious red to an absolutely incandescent shade of scarlet. Gordon's Hill! He shrieked, so loudly that several passengers jumped. How dare you! I am not late, and you are not better than me. A worker passing by chuckled. Oi, someone's got his wheels in a twist.
Yeah, we're gonna stop.
James, who had been sulking in the station yard, whirled around at Nazo's words. His face went from a furious red to an absolutely incandescent shade of scarlet. Gordon's Hill! He shrieked, so loudly that several passengers jumped. How dare you! I am not late, and you are not better than me. A worker passing by chuckled. Oi, someone's got his wheels in a twist. James steamed silently in the station yard, his irritation increasing by the minute. Nazo had not only pulled off the express job flawlessly, but also had time for a nap after. That was absolutely maddening for James. Suddenly, Gordon's snarky voice sounded behind him. Wow, James, sounds like Nazo has completely upstaged you this time. James whipped around so fast Gordon almost got a face full of steam. James, sputtering. He just got lucky. Gordon chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. Gordon, luck is it? He's pulled the express perfectly and is now taking a nap. Doesn't sound like luck to me. James, stewing in his humiliation, reluctantly went back to work. As he puffed along, he kept stealing glances at Nazo, who was now fast asleep on a siding. James seething. The gall of that young engine, taking a nap as if he owns the yards. Gordon, who had been silently observing James's growing frustration, snickered. Oh, come on, James. Are you really that bothered by a younger engine being more efficient than you? James huffed, still steamed. I'm not bothered. I just think it's disrespectful. An upstart like him, coming along and pulling my express like it's nothing. Gordon laughed again, enjoying this little spectacle. Gordon, come on now, James. Admit it. You're jealous. Nazo pulled the express without a single problem, while you would have probably had the whole train in chaos within the first 10 minutes. James was about to shoot back a retort when they were interrupted by the sound of Nazo's whistle, signaling his departure. James watched as the younger engine departed, his irritation only growing. Gordon chuckled at the sight of James's grumpy face. Gordon, looks like he's off to another job, while you're stuck here looking like a grumpy old steam engine. James huffed, refusing to look at Gordon. Jay, I'm not grumpy. I'm just annoyed. Gordon smirked. He could practically see the steam coming off of James. It was rare to see the older engine looking this flustered. Oh, I think it's more than annoyance, James. I think you're envious. Nazo is younger and faster, and that's got you all worked up. James sputtered to form a coherent rebuttal. James, I am not envious. It's absurd to even suggest it. I am simply. James's wheels screeched to a halt. His face went from furious red to pale in an instant. Enough! He bellowed, steam practically shooting out of his dome. I am not jealous. I am a really splendid engine. Nazo is just some reckless upstart who got lucky. A worker passing by muttered, Luck? That kid's been pulling jobs better than you for weeks, mate. James's already sky-high steam pressure shot up another notch. He was practically trembling with anger now. How dare that worker compare Nazo to him? He was a really splendid engine. He was not inferior to a young steam engine with no respect for the rules. Particularly not one that was currently asleep on a siding while he was stuck working in the yard. The sheer disrespect was enough to make James's wheels spin. Gordon, noticing the rising steam pressure, decided to poke the fire a little more. Looks like you're about to explode.
What?
James's already sky-high steam pressure shot up another notch. He was practically trembling with anger now. How dare that worker compare Nazo to him? He was a really splendid engine. He was not inferior to a young steam engine with no respect for the rules. Particularly not one that was currently asleep on a siding while he was stuck working in the yard. The sheer disrespect was enough to make James's wheels spin. Gordon, noticing the rising steam pressure, decided to poke the fire a little more. Looks like you're about to explode. James had begrudgingly gone back to work, still stewing in his anger over Gordon's teasing. As he puffed along the tracks, he caught sight of Nazo at the ducts. His eyes widened slightly as he saw the friendly interactions with the other engines. No way. He's getting on with everyone? Gordon, who also noticed, chuckled again. Looks like your upstart is quite the charmer after all. Who had been sulking in the yard all day, watched as Nazo effortlessly completed another job flawlessly, his face twisted in disbelief. That's it! He exploded, steam whistling from his vents. How is that possible? He's not even tired! What kind of engine just keeps going like this? A worker passing by shrugged. Guess some trains are just built different. James, still seething over Nazo's seemingly endless stamina, lay awake in his shed. He couldn't get the sight of Nazo, awake, cheerful, and not a hint of fatigue, out of his head. He was furious. How could an engine that was younger than him handle so many hard jobs in a single day, without so much as a scratch of dirt on his paint? It was unheard of. The injustice of it all was nearly maddening, especially to a proud engine like James. James, still fuming, snapped his eyes open as Nazo entered the shed. Just the sight of the younger engine's cheerful demeanor made him bristle with annoyance. Humph, he huffed, barely suppressing his irritation. I suppose you think you're the biggest star now, don't you? Pulling all those jobs without even breaking a sweat. James stiffened at the words being really useful. His ego, already bruised, took another hit. He sat up in his shed, steam practically hissing from his vents. "Oh, gone for a while?" he sneered. "What, are you finally admitting you're too tired to keep this up?" A worker passing by muttered under their breath. Or maybe someone's just got better things to do than bicker with an old grump. James froze, all his irritation quickly replaced with shock. Nazo was being sent to the main island. The main island was a prestigious place to work, filled with important industries and high-ranking officials. And here was Nazo, some young engine, being sent there instead of him? James was practically speechless. He sputtered for a moment, steam whooshing from his vents in clouds. "What?" If James thought he couldn't be more shocked, he was proven wrong. The Fat Controller was allowing Nazo to take a friend with him, and he was even letting Nazo decide who to take. James was completely dumbfounded. This was an incredible opportunity, and yet here was Nazo acting like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. You can choose any engine you like? He managed to splutter. And you're not even sure who to take? James could barely contain his mounting frustration. Not only was Nazo being given this incredible opportunity, but he was acting so casual about it, as if it were just another day of work. It was maddening to James, who had been hoping for a chance to go to the main island for years, to see Nazo so nonchalant. "You won't have time," he sputtered. "Do you have any idea how many engines, myself included, would give anything for a chance like this? And you're just playing it by ear?" James's face twisted in disbelief. Was Nazo really asking if it was a big deal? Was he really just brushing it off like it was nothing? "Yes, it's a big deal!" James exploded. "The main island is exclusive. It's where all the important industries are. And you're being sent there to work. That's a massive opportunity, you reckless, arrogant..." The other engines, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, couldn't hold back their own opinions any longer. Gordon, who had been silently smirking in the background, spoke up first. "Of course it's a big deal. Working on the main island is a privilege. Only the most important engines get sent there," Henry huffed, "and Nazo here just gets to waltz in as if it's nothing." James was only getting more and more frustrated with Nazo's nonchalant response. He gritted his teeth, his pistons practically steaming. "And you have no idea why the Fat Controller chose you?" he sputtered. "Don't you think it's slightly suspicious that you were handpicked for this? Out of all the engines on the island, you are the one being sent to the main island on an extended work trip? Don't you think there's a reason for that?" James's eyes widened as Emmy made her suggestion. The thought hadn't even crossed his mind, but the more he considered it, the more likely it seemed. The Fat Controller had a reputation as a just yet stern leader. Could he have chosen Nazo as a way to teach a lesson? A punishment? James repeated, looking at Nazo. That would make sense. You have been causing quite a lot of drama since you arrived. James's face twisted in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. You haven't been a problem? James sputtered, his steam pressure rising rapidly. Nazo, you've caused more trouble in 24 days than most engines do in 24 years. You teased me about my blushing. You called the express an easy job and then pulled it perfectly while I was stuck shunting trucks. And now you're being sent to the main island, either as a reward or a punishment, because of your reckless behavior. James was stunned. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The sheer audacity of Nazo's words, claiming he wasn't made the same as them, was too much to process at first. You, James stammered, his face turning an even deeper shade of red. That is not how this works. We are all steam engines on the same railway. You don't get to just say, I am different, and expect special treatment. A worker passing by muttered under their breath, Mate, maybe if you acted less like a spoiled prince, no one would treat you differently. James blinked, his anger momentarily fading into bewilderment. Nazo had said it so matter-of-factly, as if it were completely normal. Parts of other trains. What did that even mean? You're made from other train parts? James said slowly, trying to process this new information. James was absolutely stunned. He had never heard of an engine being made in such a way. It was completely unheard of. And yet here was Nazo, casually revealing his unique origin as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. From broken parts? James repeated, his brain working overtime to comprehend this revelation. James's eyes widened with each name Nazo mentioned. His parts, Edward's parts, Thomas's parts, Duck's parts. It was absolutely mind-blowing. He had always assumed Nazo was a normal engine, but now he realized there was nothing normal about him at all. You have parts from all of us? James whispered. That's impossible. How are you even functional? James was completely flabbergasted. The workers had taken their broken parts and repurposed them for Nazo? It was a concept he couldn't even begin to comprehend. He sputtered for a moment, trying to form some kind of response. You mean our broken parts are now inside of you? He said incredulously. James felt as though his pistons were going to burst from the sheer incredulity of the situation. He had never thought it was possible, but here was Nazo casually admitting that he was made from the discarded parts of other trains. It was beyond anything James had ever heard of. And you just work? No issues? No problems at all? He said, still struggling to grasp the concept. James was even more bewildered. Nazo had been updated multiple times? What on earth did that mean? He sputtered for a moment, struggling to understand the implications of these words. Updated, he repeated, his voice rising in pitch. You were upgraded? How many times? James's face went completely blank. His wheels screeched to a halt as he processed the sheer amount of times Nazo had been updated. 22? That was impossible. How could an engine be modified that many times and still function? 22? James shrieked, steam practically shooting out of his dome. That's not even physically possible. What is wrong with you? James froze. His face, which had been a furious shade of red, suddenly paled. Nazo had noticed him following him? The thought alone was mortifying. I was not following you! James exploded defensively, steam shooting from his vents in thick clouds. That is an absolutely ridiculous accusation. I have no reason to follow some reckless engine who pulls express trains like it's nothing and then claims he doesn't even know what the main island is. James felt his face burn with embarrassment. He had been caught. There was no denying it now. He sputtered for a moment, trying to come up with a plausible explanation. So what if I was watching you? He sputtered, trying to sound nonchalant. I just wanted to see you fall on your face. I wanted to see you fail. That's all. James huffed, still trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. He had been hoping to catch Nazo making a mistake, to show everyone that the younger engine was not as perfect as he seemed. But so far, Nazo had done nothing but succeed, and it was infuriating. Of course you're not perfect, James muttered sarcastically, but you certainly act like you are. James's jaw clenched. It was so frustrating. Nazo was always so cheerful and friendly, acting like everything in the world was sunshine and rainbows, and it was all completely genuine. James couldn't stand it. You're too nice for your own good, he muttered. You're going to get taken advantage of before long if you keep acting like that. James stiffened, his previous anger giving way to sudden concern. He had never even considered the idea that Nazo might be hurt for being too kind. What a terrifying thought! You were told that? He repeated quietly. By who and when? A worker passing by chimed in. Mate, maybe don't get so worked up over an engine just trying to do right by others. James shuddered at the image that came to mind, the sweet, kind-hearted Daisy warning poor, naive Nazo that he could get hurt due to his kindness. The very idea made James's pistons ache with worry. He shook his head, pushing aside the feeling. The last thing he needed was to start worrying about the young engine. It was ridiculous. That Daisy, he muttered. She's too overprotective. You can't go believing everything she says. The other engines, who had been eavesdropping on the conversation, couldn't resist adding their own opinions. Gordon? Overprotective? That's an understatement. Daisy practically wraps engines in cotton wool. Henry grumbling. And now she's got Nazo believing he'll get hurt for being decent? Ridiculous. A worker passing by muttered under his breath. Or maybe it's not so ridiculous, considering how some of you lot act. James bristled at the worker's remark, but he knew the man had a point. He and the other engines weren't exactly the epitome of kindness, especially to new arrivals like Nazo, but it was hard to change centuries of ingrained behavior. And anyways, there was no way he was going to admit that to the worker. Gordon, we're not that bad. We only rough Nazo up a little. He needs to learn not to be so naively over-friendly with everyone he meets. James's face twisted in offense. He had always been a really splendid engine, and it was infuriating that Nazo would imply otherwise. Excuse me, James snapped, steam hissing from his vents. I am the most splendid engine on this railway, Gordon included. You don't get to waltz in here with your "ps of everyone" nonsense and then act like you know how things work around here. A worker passing by muttered, Mate, maybe if you spent less time boasting about your paintwork. James shot a death glare in the worker's direction, his irritation boiling over. How dare anyone insult his appearance? He was beautifully painted, and he took great pride in it. At least I have good-looking paintwork, he spat. Unlike some engines I've seen lately. He sent a pointed look in Nazo's direction. Stiffened slightly at the comment, and his expression darkened. It was true. He had once been painted black and red, and Edward was the one who had helped fix his paint. What's your point? He grumbled defensively, trying to hide his discomfort. James's face paled at the idea. He could not let Nazo choose Duck or Toby, not when he was standing right there. He sputtered for a moment, grasping for a reason, any reason, to convince Nazo to choose him. "Wait," he blurted. You want to take Duck or Toby instead?" James bristled at that. He knew that he, Gordon, Henry, had been rather critical of Nazo's performance lately, but they were just trying to keep him in line. Someone had to keep the young engine grounded. He huffed indignantly. "We've just been trying to help you," he protested. "We've got experience on this railway, and we know what we're talking about." Tow had been watching the exchange somewhat silently, finally decided to chime in. He had a different perspective on the situation, as always. "I think you need to lay off Nazo a bit," he said in his quiet voice. "He's not hurting anyone. He's just being himself." James's jaw dropped. Toby was defending Nazo now? The tiny engine had never shown much interest in the drama before. "Since when do you get a say in this?" James sputtered, steam puffing angrily from his dome. "You're always too busy to care about anything." A worker passing by muttered under their breath, "Mate, maybe if you stopped being so prickly for 5 seconds." James bristled at the worker's comment, but he was more upset about Toby's unexpected defense. Why was the small engine suddenly taking side with the newcomer? It wasn't fair. "You don't know anything about Nazo," he protested. "He's so naive and over-friendly. It's infuriating. He'll get taken advantage of before long." As if things weren't bad enough, now Duck and Edward were weighing in as well. James's head was spinning from all these unexpected opinions. Honestly, James, Edward said calmly, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Nazo's a delightful young engine. You're too harsh on him. He's a ray of sunshine, Duck agreed, nodding. You could learn a thing or two from him, you know? James spluttered indignantly. How dare they all start ganging up on him now? He had been the rational one, the one with common sense. He stomped his wheels and fumed. A ray of sunshine? He scoffed. More like a pain in the rear. The last thing this railway needs is another overly cheerful engine. James's jaw clenched. He didn't want to admit it out loud, but he was starting to feel like the bad guy in this situation. It wasn't his fault that Nazo was so annoying. Surely everyone could see that. In a way, yes, he sputtered. You're too cheerful, too nice. It's infuriating. James felt a pang of panic as Nazo mentioned the other options. If Nazo didn't choose to come with him, it would be a blow to his already battered pride. He tried to keep his cool, though, and he forced a scoff. "Oh, please," he muttered. As if anyone would want to come with you. But he couldn't shake the nagging feeling of worry. What if Nazo did choose someone else? Toby suddenly chimed in, his quiet voice cutting through the tension. His words sent a wave of unease through James, Gordon, and Henry. If Nazo didn't want to come with them, someone else would be chosen, possibly one of the kind-hearted, cheerful engines like Daisy or Rosie. The thought of having one of them around was a nightmare. Wait, Gordon sputtered. Nazo, you can't be serious. You'd rather choose those engines over us? The other engines suddenly looked a bit panicked at this realization. The thought of having to deal with a kind engine when they were used to the likes of Gordon and James, it was a nightmare. You can't do that, Henry protested. We need you to come with us. We don't need any kind-hearted engines tagging along. James's face paled as the full weight of Nazo's words hit him. He had been so busy being outraged that he hadn't even stopped to consider the real consequences. If Nazo refused, it meant Daisy, or worse, Daisy, would be sent in his place. No, that is not happening, James cried out in horror. I would rather pull trucks for a week than have Daisy on this trip. James froze. His wheels screeched to a halt, and his face went pale. The reality of the situation hit him like a runaway train. If Nazo refused, none of them would get to go at all. You can't be serious, James stammered, steam puffing nervously from his vents. That's blackmail. A worker passing by muttered under their breath. Or maybe it's just consequences for being difficult. James was horrified. The thought of having to deal with Daisy, Rosie, or worse, Mally, on a trip where he was supposed to be the star engine unthinkable, his pride flared up instantly. Fine, James snapped. I'll behave. Just don't let one of them come instead. A worker passing by muttered. Took you long enough. His face fell. He had just promised to behave, and he hoped that would be enough to convince Nazo to choose him. But the young engine had just thrown another wrench into the works. What do you mean you're not picking me? He cried out indignantly. I promised to be nice. His heart sank. The young engine had a point. He had been nothing but harsh and rude since Nazo had first arrived. Why would Nazo choose him over the kind-hearted Daisy, or even the sweet yet dim-witted Toby? James swallowed his pride, feeling utterly pathetic. He muttered begrudgingly, Fine, I get it. I've been not pleasant. James felt a rush of emotions as he listened to Nazo's words. On the one hand, he was still angry and bitter about the whole situation, but on the other, he felt a pang of regret for his harsh behavior. He was suddenly aware of how selfish he had been acting. James sighed heavily, steam huffing from his vents. He had promised to behave, and perhaps it was time to prove it. I understand, he muttered after a moment. I haven't given you much reason to choose me. The realization that Nazo was truly nervous about this whole thing hit James like a ton of bricks. He was so used to the young engine being cheerful and confident that it was jarring to hear him express doubt in himself. He felt guilty? Yes, guilty. He had been so focused on his annoyance towards Nazo and the situation that he hadn't even considered how Nazo might feel. You're afraid? He found himself blurting out, that you'll mess up? James was stunned. He hadn't realized that his own stubbornness and pride had actually made Nazo doubt himself. The thought of the young engine being afraid to fail because of him sent a sharp pang through James's chest. I didn't mean, he muttered, suddenly feeling very small despite his size. It's not a big deal. You won't mess up. A worker passing by scoffed. Now you tell him. James could see the growing anxiety in Nazo's expression. The young engine's face was pinched in worry, his wheels trembling slightly as he listed off his fears. James felt a pang of guilt, knowing that his own behavior had likely fueled these worries. He wanted to tell Nazo that everything would be fine, but another part of him knew that his reassurances would ring hollow after how he had behaved. He was lost for words. A worker passing by sighed at the sight. "You're not helping, mate?" James was struggling to find something reassuring to say. He was acutely aware of the workers around them, listening in on the exchange. One worker muttered under his breath, "He'll never stop whining." "You're overthinking it," James tried to say. "You'll do fine. They won't expect you to be perfect." The worker rolled their eyes, scoffing at the hypocrisy of that statement. "Yeah, no pressure at all." James felt a pang of guilt. He had gotten so caught up in his own feelings of pride and rivalry that he had forgotten the bigger picture. Nazo was right. This wasn't just about the young engine's ego. He was representing the whole island. James's eyes flicked to the workers surrounding them, watching the scene unfold. He was suddenly acutely aware of how he must look, and he didn't like it. They won't expect perfection," James muttered weakly. James felt his gut twist. Nazo's question hit like a blow. The young engine's point was clear. The pressure was on both of them, and James had hardly been making it easier. He tried to come up with some reassuring response, anything to soothe Nazo's worries, but all he managed was a feeble whisper. We have to try our best." A worker watching the conversation rolled their eyes. "Wow, what a pep talk," they muttered sarcastically.